Hey, I'm Bob at I Like to Make Stuff. Today we're going to make a Minecraft torch in real life. In our house and at work, we play a whole lot of Minecraft, so we thought it would be really cool if we tried to make one of these in real life. Over the years, I've seen a lot of different projects for making Minecraft torches. Some of them are battery powered, most of them are 3D printed, some of them are made of paper. I've never seen one made out of hardwood and plastic, and so I'm going to do that. And I also want to make one that can be mounted to the wall as a sconce. I'm still trying to figure this out, but basically I think this is what we're going to do. We're going to make the actual torch, the wooden part, out of wood. I want to make this out of blocks of walnut and glue them together so they still have the kind of pixelated nature. And then on top, I want to make the flame part out of acrylic. And we're going to try dyeing that acrylic to get some variation in color. But one of the big things is to figure out the size of each one of these pixels that we need to recreate in the real world. And that all goes back to the size of an electrical box. This is essentially what is currently in the wall. And we need to completely cover this opening with the thing that's sticking off. And it's going to be sticking off at a 45-degree angle. So I did some basic math, and this is 4 inches. If you make a triangle with a 4-inch side and 45-degree angles, these end up being roughly 2.8 inches. Now that's a little too precise for this thing, and we want to make sure that it's covered. So we're going to go up to 3 inches. And what I mean by that is that this thing is going to be 3 inches square in both directions, which means each one of these little boxes needs to be 1.5 inches. So the first thing we're going to do is cut down a bunch of 1.5 inch squares of plexiglass, and then we're going to attempt to dye them different colors. Okay, I got a bunch of these cut down, and I want to show you how these are going to be laid out, and then we'll talk about the dyeing. So basically, I'm going to make a grid. This is going to be the top of the piece, and I'm also going to need these same 4 pieces to fold up in each direction. So I'm going to be making a cross of these that are all different variations of yellow and orange, and then once they're all dyed, they can be folded up and glued together into a cube. So we'll have basically these two right here, also right there. But each one of these needs to be dyed a different variation of yellow and orange, like a flame. And so we're going to attempt something I've never done before, and that's dyeing acrylic. You could, of course, just buy these in the color, but I found that you can use synthetic dye. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but as long as we end up with a bunch of variations within these pieces of yellow and clear and kind of white, it should be good. Because on the inside of this entire thing, we're going to use an RGB light bulb so we can change the color of the torch. There are some other products out there that actually are these torches that you can buy. They're USB powered, or I've seen people 3D print these. I want to make sure that this one is a little bit different because it's going to be running off mains power on the wall, controlled by a light switch, but I want to be able to change the color. The idea here is that you put almost boiling water in a pot and make sure that that pot is not one you're going to cook with again. Then you drop in the plastic, the heat opens up the surface of the plastic, and then the dye will bond to that surface. So we're going to start with a single piece and just a little bit of dye. We'll go about a minute and see what it does to the plastic, and that'll give us an idea of how many different pieces, how many colors we can get, how long it's going to take, all of that stuff. So I rinsed that off just to see how it worked after a few minutes. Absolutely nothing. So we're gonna have to change our tactic a little bit. I think I need to take it to the stove and just get the temperature up so it stays warm but not boiling. I want it to boil. I just think it's cooling off too quickly here, I think. So far, it's not doing much, and so we had the idea of possibly sanding the backside of this to open up that surface. Maybe that'll grab some of the color. These are also going to need to be diffused a little bit anyway, so you don't see the light bulb on the inside of it. So this kind of works both ways. So that kind of worked, but not great. So this is the original clear one. This is the one that we frosted and dyed. I think this will work better if we frost both sides and then dye it, but it's still kind of just a mustard color. It's not really what we want. So rather than spend a whole lot of time on this, this is our fallback now. And the next thing we're gonna try is taking one of these, frosting both sides, and then using acrylic paint wash, so acrylic paint in water, and just kind of mix it around on there and see if that's enough to actually get the color that we want without having to worry about the dyeing process. I think this is gonna work, but honestly, until they dry, I won't really know. But once they dry, probably another 24 hours or so, I'm gonna mix up the color combinations and then glue them together using acrylic cement. This will give me a square of 4 squares. I can make those and then fold those into a box and glue them together. And we'll have to wait to see if this turns out before we can actually try that. While we're waiting on that to dry, let me tell you about the actual light that's going to go in this thing. This is a hue bulb from Philips, and it's like a full color or white bulb that you can control with the app, but you could use anything here. This particular bulb has a candelabra base. That's what we call it in the US. It's an E12, and this is the base that it goes in. Now these are really inexpensive, like a couple dollars a piece. They're really easy to wire up. They've just got the 2 wires on the outside and a little sleeve that goes over top of them. So you just wire that up, put on the sleeve, and then drop this in. But another thing I wanted to point out, that in this bulb, the light is only emitted from this top half. So we actually have to drill a little bit of a hole in our torch, drop this down in so only this much sticks out. For the wooden part of the torch, we're gonna use this piece of walnut. It's currently kind of gross, but we're gonna mill it up so it's nice and smooth, and then cut it down into 1.5 inch cubes, because the total torch needs to be about 3 inches wide, 3 inches deep, and about 12 inches long. So I'm gonna mill this up, and then we'll chop it up. I got all these pieces cut, and this is actually looking exactly like I was picturing it in my mind, which is super cool. Got a lot of variation here within a single piece of walnut, and that single piece was the perfect amount. So this is exactly what it's going to end up looking like once we chop off that 45-degree angle on the bottom. Now before we glue these up, each one of these has to be sanded so that they fit together snugly, but also I need a hole on the inside of this thing that goes top to bottom to run a wire through. So before I glue this up, I'm going to take each one of these and knock off the corner that will be facing the inside. It would be way easier to do that on each one of these than having to drill like a 14-inch hole through all of it once it's glued up. So I'm going to go ahead and get that ready, and then we can actually start gluing this part together. The disc sander made that really, really fast, but if you don't have one of those, I think a chisel and a hammer on the corner would probably be even faster. Let's find out. Want to? Let's just find out. Even faster. So one of the things I'm thinking about here is making sure that this looks like it's made out of individual blocks, like in Minecraft. Now if you glue these, if you take these pieces and you glue them up really tightly together, you kind of lose the fact that they're made out of separate pieces because the grain's going the same direction. So before I glue these together, I'm going to take each one of them, and this is going to take a while, and add a little tiny bevel to each corner so that when you go together, there's going to be a little bit of a trough there, and that should visually separate all of the different pieces. You may not even be able to see it once this thing's up on the wall, but I'm going to go ahead and do it now while it's easier. I'm going to practice gluing these together because acrylic cement is, you got to be very precise. So I'm going to use these ones that didn't really work and just try to line them up and put enough cement on them just to hold them together. The stuff is thinner than water, and you have to use a needle. You're supposed to lay it down and drag it. Oh boy. I don't know what I'm doing here, as I've mentioned, but I'm going to try to lay these down on some painter's tape just so that I make sure that they're going to stay where I want them to be. And then I'm going to drop the acrylic cement on the joints from the backside, what will eventually be the backside, and let it dry, and hopefully this will work. There you go. Ah! I mean, that worked out. You know, it's not exactly like, It's pretty close. I like it. I wasn't super happy with how the color was distributed on this one, so I did some experiments over the weekend trying different things to get color on top of the different pieces of acrylic. I tried mixing different dyes, food color, glue, water, all sorts of different things, and ended up on this particular dye mixed with some water. I laid out the pieces of acrylic and then dripped this on top of them with an even coat and let it dry that way, and the results were a whole lot better. So I redid all of these pieces and made this one instead. It's not perfect, but I think it looks way closer to what I wanted this thing to be. So now I've got pretty much everything I need to go ahead and finish up the torch. Next up, I want to mount the light bulb and the socket in this thing, and I'm realizing now that it would have been smart to leave the top maybe 2 without knocking off those inside corners, because I could more easily drill into them and get the right size hole. Right now it's going to be kind of hard to drill a hole in that because there's nothing in the center for the middle of a Forstner bit to actually land on. So I'm going to have to kind of chisel this out to be able to drop this down in, and I'm going to have to mount this part down inside. I'll probably have to do that with hot glue or maybe some sort of other heat resistant padding. But I'm going to get this thing locked down in there so that the bulb is recessed to this point, and make sure that I can still remove the bulb in case I need to change it in the future. I ended up using a chisel, and it wasn't that bad, but I opened up this enough to hold this giant washer that I had, which just happens to actually fit this. So the plan is to use hot glue to kind of hold these two things together. Then I can drop the entire assembly down there, and it will stop right down in there. And that's going to be just about perfect to hold the bulb out where I want it to be. Now that we've got this thing fixed, we're going to wire it up. But before we can do that, we actually have to cut this. So this is going to sit at a little bit more than a 45-degree angle, or less, depending on which way you look at it. But I've got this figured out so I can cut off a section here, and then that's going to be mounted to this box, which will be in the wall. We're going to do that by putting in a screw here, and then putting in a matching hole with a keyhole so that it can kind of drop onto the screw head. And then the way that we'll fix it in place is by driving in another screw here at the bottom to go in this bottom hole. We're going to take advantage of the holes that are already in here and just make matching ones on the back of this thing. But first, we got to cut this. We're just about ready to put this thing together and mount it on the wall. And I wanted to point out that when you wire up one of these little candelabra sockets, you're basically just making a lamp. So I've got an old lamp wire here with a plug on the end of it. I'm going to go ahead and wire this up and test it with the bulb, get the bulb working and hooked up to my IoT and all that type of stuff. And then we'll just cut this off, feed the wire through our big walnut torch, and then we can mount it on the wall. That's going to fall off if somebody breathes on it, but I think it's at least a place to start. Maybe put another one on all the sides so it has to like fit around all 4 of them or something. We've got a smart switch that can control this thing so the kids can manage it, but also it's on a timer and it goes down really, really dim, so this can act as a nightlight in my boy's room. Now, one of my sons told me that I was really cool for having made this, so I call this thing a win. If this gave you an idea for something that you could make in your house, I would love to hear about it, and if it gave you an idea for something else Minecraft related that we could make, let us know in the comments. We've got tons of other types of projects that you may want to check out, and if you're not subscribed, be sure to do that as well. That's it for this one. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time. Better surface finish on the edges, not surface finish. Or paper. Most of them are battery powered, and so I want to make one out of hardwood and plastic. It is made out of hardwood and plastic and can be mounted on the wall to act as a sconce.
Just staring at you.